What I want to emphasize is that the investigation that the European Union plans to take is to protect its own industry in the name of fair competition. This is blatant protectionist behavior. It will have a negative impact on China-EU economic and trade relations.
That was Yadong from China's Commerce Ministry responding to Wednesday's announcement by the EU Commission President Ursula Von Der Leyen that the Commission is to investigate Chinese state support for its electric vehicle industry. Dr. Von der Leyen said Chinese vehicles are flooding global markets and that state subsidies were having a distorting effect. Well, given recent and ongoing tensions between the European Union and China, is there more to this than just economics? Peter Rashish is director of the Geoeconomics Programme at the American-German Institute. That's a think tank focusing on what it regards as the pressing issues facing those two countries. Welcome to DW. Does Beijing have a point when it accuses the EU of protectionism?
No, I wouldn't see this as protectionist. I'd see it more as a form of self-defense. I mean, the fact is that under the rules of the World Trade Organization, countries are allowed to investigate whether one of their trading partners has been subsidizing in a way that leads to unfair competition, and then also to impose tariffs or taxes on the imports from that country if they find that they have done that. So I think this is pretty much up and up for the moment.
OK, so this is what you would have expected. I wonder, just looking at the future, does the non-China world have a problem coming up on its doorstep when it comes to the future of electric vehicles, given that China controls so much of the production of the minerals and rare earths needed for the battery technology for the EV industry?
Well, I think that's one of the main motivations behind the announcement from the EU. There is the sense that there's a kind of one-sided dependency that the EU, as well as other advanced economies, have on China, because China either directly or indirectly controls most of the inputs, the raw materials that go into the manufacturing of electric vehicles. And now we see that they're also ramping up their production of the vehicles themselves. And I think you know, in the EU, there's, I think, on the one hand, a concern about fairness, about not having unfair competition, but there's also a concern that the EU wants to be able to move to the green transition on its own terms. And in both of those cases, I think there's a sense that too much dependence on China might get in the way.
Right. So this row, then, as I look at it, does this present Germany with a particular dilemma, with its car industry being behind in this technology, in the EV technology? So European tariffs might be advantageous to Germany, but then, of course, China's a massive market for Germany's exporters, and who wants to annoy your biggest customer, especially during as a cost of living crisis?
Right. Well, I think that things are changing in Germany to a certain degree. I think one lesson that German authorities have, the German government has drawn, and perhaps also German companies are beginning to draw from the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the dependence on gas imports that has brought to kind of a head. They've realized they don't want to get into that kind of dependence, if possible, again in the future. And you know, certainly automobiles are a leading sector in Germany. It's still a world, it's still competitive on a world basis, and there is a great hope that German auto companies can also play an important role, in the next generation of electric vehicles. Of course, we have to remember that German companies produce a lot of cars in China for the Chinese market for export, and of course, if the EU decides to place tariffs on Chinese exports, it will also probably affect the exports of the German companies that are making electric vehicles inside China.
OK, so if big exporters, big European exporters like Germany are behind in the race and would benefit from these EU tariffs, and there's also this one-sided dependency that you've talked about, all that sounds like protectionism.
I really wouldn't call it protectionism. I think we have to understand
sounds like
that
protecting
the global
your
economy
market.
is changing. Well, I think the global economy is changing. I think there's a sense that while engaging in free trade is important, it's important to do that on the right terms, and that some of the rules aren't up to date, and perhaps not all countries are obeying the rules to the same degree. And so we've seen in the European Union over the last few years an attempt on the one hand to maintain a strong commitment to the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and to a rules-based approach to the economy, but also at the same time to develop more tools that the EU can use to respond to a global economy that's getting more conflictual, to a global economy where there's more concern about values, there's more concern about the effect of climate change. And so there's a reconsideration, I think, of the balance in trade policy right now.
OK, doubtless we haven't heard the last of this. Thanks for joining us. Peter Rashish from the American-German Institute.